Hello, everyone. Welcome to Recharging Chat. This is Sharon Kimberly Cravens with my buddy, Dr. Luann Morano. Today is July 12th, 2023, and we're finishing up our part 3 of Lyme, what to do if you get a tick sting. And there's a load of awesome information we have for you tonight. Shall we step right into the deep end of the pool?
Yes.
We've been doing this deep dive. And it's not just Lyme, it's Lyme and co-infections. So a little bit of everything. So we're gonna start off with the slideshow, right?
Yeah, we're going to start off where we left off last time, which was talking about the differentiation between germ theory versus terrain theory.
Yes.
And why this is important to understand when you're looking at something like chronic Lyme.
Right. So
germ theory versus terrain theory. Germ theory is Louis Pasteur. He talks about, in his theory, bacteria are contagious. We get exposed to bacteria and then we get sick. Our immune system is weak and we need vaccinations basically to make our immune system stronger. Versus terrain theory, which was Antoine Béchamp. And he, in his research, showed that bacteria, they show up for a specific reason. Bacteria is nature's way of breaking things down, and toxicity is the main reason why people struggle to get over chronic infections.
yeah, so that's a controversial thought in this day and age, because in the big picture, toxins are what cause the tissue damage. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the fact that microorganisms themselves pleomorph in response to the damaged tissues. So we'll get into that. But pathogenic microorganisms are actually there because of the environment. So that's the major takeaway here.
Yeah, and we've been very excited about getting to this part of it because it really explains not only chronic Lyme, but a lot of other chronic conditions that are affecting people's immune system, and the way that we have been programmed to think versus the reality of what we are actually seeing and what's happening.
Exactly. And again, it's not just Lyme itself, it's the co-infections along with Lyme. So one of the major points that we're going to talk about is, what is pleomorphism? So here we have 2 ways bacteria, fungus, and parasites can become pathogenic. And pathogenic just means infectious, right?
Yeah.
So pleomorphism is the ability of microorganisms to alter their morphology, their biological functions, or their reproductive modes in response to environmental conditions. And bacteria are agents of digestion. They're nature's way of biodegrading poisons. So that's like an example.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in nature, breaking down in cycles in natures and animals, and breaking down. You walk through the woods, you can see this consistently of nature's way of biodegrading different poisons, toxins, dead animals, all kinds of things.
Natural.
So quorum sensing is a cell-to-cell communication by bacteria, by parasites, and also other organisms. They use chemical signaling molecules called autoinducers.
But that's a separate topic. We're going to get into that later. But for now, we're going to show you a video of Dr. Jay Davidson discussing a little bit more about pleomorphism. And it's about 8 minutes. And we'll share that with you now. But it's really fascinating. And here you go.
Pasteur, he was never a doctor, but people give him credit and then it gets published in a journal. It's like, you go back to the old textbooks written about him, he definitely was not. So rabies and anthrax vaccine, failure and fraud. I mean, Pasteur's treatments for rabies and anthrax serum was a colossal failure and fraud. You can read about that. Antoine Béchamp, he was the real genius. So here is his qualifications. He was quiet, never sought attention. He was the first to explain the fermentation mysteries. He was a master of pharmacy, doctor of science, doctor of medicine, professor of medical chemistry, pharmacy at Faculty of Medicine at Montpellier. And there's other things in there. I didn't want to put them all. He had so many things. Honorary titles. He worked in a lab until he was 83 years old. He was definitely attacked by Pasteur, and unfortunately that won out on the perception on Pasteur and Beauchamp. But he supposedly discovered fermentation 2 years before Pasteur ever even claimed it. So here's what we're looking at. In this older textbook, in this book from 1923, this evidence against bacteria as the origin of mortification was so convincing that Professor Estor had once exclaimed, "Bacteria cannot be the cause of gangrene. They are the effects of it. Principle, bugs are always there when the environment changes, i.e. body parts die, then the microorganisms pleomorph to break it down." And I'm going to explain pleomorphism in a second. So Beauchamp on changing forms. Beauchamp saw that bacteria could change their forms. The rod shape passed into a spheroid, and this was denied by Pasteur. So basically, bugs, microorganisms changing form is called pleomorphism. Beauchamp saw that. Royal Rife saw that under microscopes. Pasteur didn't believe in that. So if you go to the great website of Wikipedia, under pleomorphism microbiology, I actually thought this was quite interesting, so I'm going to read this. In microbiology, pleomorphism is the ability of some microorganisms to alter their morphology, biological functions, or reproductive modes in response to environmental conditions. In the first decade of the 20th century, the term pleomorphism was used to refer to the idea that bacteria change morphological, biological systems or reproductive methods dramatically according to the environmental cues. This claim was controversial among microbiologists at the time and split them into two schools, the monomorphists, who opposed the claim, and the pleomorphists. So here's some notable pleomorphism people. Antoine Beauchamp. You can also see Royal Raymond Rife. According to a 1997 journal by Milton Wainwright, a British microbiologist, pleomorphism of bacteria lacked wide acceptance among modern microbiologists at the time. Monomorphic theory supported by, guess who? Louis Pasteur. You can see Robert Koch, or Koch postulates, emerged to become the predominant paradigm in modern medical science. It is now almost universally accepted that each bacterial cell is derived from a previously existing cell of practically the same size and shape. However, it has been recently shown that certain bacteria are capable of dramatically changing shape. So a little bit lower on the page here, same page. Although it has been recently shown that certain bacteria are capable of dramatically changing shape, pleomorphy remains a controversial concept. A well-accepted example of pleomorphism is H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, which exists of both helix shape form and coccoid form. And you can see there's some other bugs listed. Now, one factor, I'm reading that lower yellow line there, or green line, one factor that affects the pleomorphism of some bacteria is their nutrition. For example, and I'll show this journal article, but basically you change the nutrients that the bugs are getting, the microorganisms, and they will change form, meaning you change the environment, they will morph. And this last line I thought was interesting, under viruses. The virons of certain viruses sometimes exhibit pleomorphism. So even on Wikipedia, they're basically talking about, yeah, there's bacterial pleomorphism and there's viruses. So I started digging around as I like to find and looking for, are there pleomorphic bacteria? Are there pleomorphic microorganisms? Just under pleomorphic streptococci bacteria, I found these journal articles, 1919, 1919, 1921, 1934, 1951, 69, 71, 77, 96, 97. I mean, you can see that pleomorphism has been shown in science for many years. The presence of pleomorphic bacteria in the blood of healthy humans would have important implications for disease transmission and blood transfusion. In the present study, we observe pleomorphic bacteria-like forms in human blood, which were like the ones described in previous studies. So that was, 2017. That was Scientific Reports, 2017. This is 2020, demystifying pleomorphic forms in disease. So a recent provocative microbiological data lends credence to the hypothesis and corroborates the multiplicity of pleomorphic forms that develop during reproduction of the L forms in vitro. What is that saying? We see and support that we're looking at pleomorphic bacteria, that actually exists. This is some more research basically showing that. Again, it's all about the environment. You change the environment, bugs can change form. This is pleomorphism. The belief of what Pasteur was is that bugs only come from outside of us. So we have to sterilize. We have to, cleanse our body. We have to sterilize our body. We have to kill. We have to poison all the bugs off of us because that's the only way we're going to get sick. When really the truth is we already have all the microorganisms in us. It's when we're exposed to a poison that then the bugs pleomorph, to then break down, because they are nature's way of degrading poisons and degrading diseased tissue. They break that down. So we see them in diseased tissue and we think they're the cause, but it's actually the poison that is the source, and the bugs that are already in us change form. This is the big takeaway that I'm trying to get to here. So Claude Bernard, Pasteur's contemporary and friend, the physiologist, argued instead for the importance of balance in the body's internal environment. What he called, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but the constancy of the internal environment is the condition for a free and independent life. So he, even though he was friends with Pasteur, he disagreed, and he said it's about really the environment. So let's swing it over to Tim, the atomic man.
All right. So that makes total sense. And that's why it's so important that we bring it forward, because the focus in our society is we have to, like you said, vaccinate, sterilize, antibacterial hand soap, all of that, when it's really
It's the internal environment,
not relevant.
keeping it in a balanced state, as opposed to trying to take something to kill something else.
And that's why when you're targeting Lyme and you just are focusing on killing it, it doesn't work.
Leads to a more deeper chronic Lyme.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Borrelia and pleomorphism. So morphological and biochemical features of Borrelia burgdorferi is in its pleomorphic form. This is an article here that just shows how this actually does pleomorph. And then this article here talks about distinctive evasions and mechanisms to allow the persistence of the Borrelia in different human cell lines. So, continuing and having it in our cells as the environment is changing, it's staying in the body.
And then there's different forms of Lyme. It has classically 4 forms: a spirochete, a cyst or a round body, intracellular, and also biofilm. And it was previously believed that one of the forms was a cell wall deficient form. And they're saying that research does not support that term for the Lyme bacteria anymore, but that's worth noting.
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments in the field about cell wall and not cell wall.
Right. But here's an interesting thought, right? So if that's the case, then what we just put forth, then the intentionally disruptive thought is, what if we all have Lyme? What if it's not because of a sting or a tick or anything that has occurred? What if we all have this? Or what if we have the co-infections, Babesia, Bartonella? What if we all have nematode eggs, etc.?
But we're not expressing it because our internal state is balanced. And once it is off balance, it is then allowed to express. Or if we get emotionally triggered,
Yeah.
or we get into some kind of toxic state, it possibly can start to pleomorph
and show up. So here we have persisters. They are not antibiotic resistant mutants. They are genetically identical to their vulnerable counterparts. Instead, they are bacteria that have gone into a dormant state. So that's the disruptive thought of, what if we have a dormant situation of having Lyme inside of us, or the co-infections inside of us? It's entirely possible. It's a viable thought. What we are mentioning is what affects the terrain that causes these organisms to suddenly be triggered or to hatch and pleomorph. Like Luann said, environmentally, energetically, things that happen to us emotionally, environmental triggers, changes in the Schumann resonance, magnetism, lunar influences, solar influences. The average I think the Schumann resonance is 7.35, was it?
It's 7.83.
7.83
Hertz.
hertz is the normal Schumann resonance, and some people are sensitive when that shifts.
And we see lately the past couple of years, just looking at the shifts in it, we've seen it like hit high off the charts. Like we've seen high spikes that correlate with a lot of people with the expression of COVIDs.
Yeah, and that, and like the full moons. Some of us who are going through the full moon protocols, like, you know what happens when the full moon hits. It's just things happen, and attitudes and energies change drastically. There's physical manifestations of that. Then there's chemical shifts, which could be nutritional deficiencies, which are caused by toxins. Tissues dying, toxins and poisons, all the chemical influences, glyphosate, mold, radioactive elements, toxic metals, all that jazz, mental, emotional. So going through a major sort of issue or something tumultuous energetically, like a divorce, financial stressors, deaths, and then there's the physical influences. So if you have a slip, fall, car accident, any kind of trauma, and that could even be something that's spiritual shifts.
And as we say in chiropractic, right? The physical, the emotional, the chemical, all these things that can subluxate you, disconnect you from the light, change, allow things to express.
Thoughts, toxins, and the traumas.
Yes.
All of that can cause the pleomorphism.
Then we have the Bartonella pleomorphism. So again, Bartonella, they pleomorph. They have gram-negative rods that are fastidious, aerobic, and oxidative negative organisms within. So, basically what this research is saying here, that the species grow, and they change, and they polymorph inside of our bodies. It can happen we see it also in, like, here, this is saying we've seen it in rabbits and horses' blood and sheep's blood and other animal species as well.
Yeah, I'm unable to scroll, so let's go back. Here we go.
So the environment that we are living in externally, right? Our house, our external environment in the world, all these different things can cause all these different types of emotional triggers and different things that are going to create all of this pleomorphism. And we can have chronic Lyme, or we can have acute Lyme. When we have acute Lyme come up, we know that it starts expressing, with the CellCore, we have ways to go ahead and right away introduce these formulas, and that we talked about in the last show that we did. We talked about how we can get in there and treat the acute symptoms with the IS formulas. But when you have a chronic state of Lyme in the body, somebody that is like, they're chronically suffering from this and they've tried everything, that is when you want to introduce the roadmap to health.
Yes.
And that is the comprehensive protocol, which we like to go this route, because order matters. When we talk about, like, well, how did the body get into this chronic state of imbalance to begin with? We have to look again at parasites, because we know that parasites contain toxins, they contain heavy metals, they are hiding all this stuff in our body, and they are changing the way that our body responds to everything, basically. So going through the comprehensive protocol, we're going through and we're going to open up the channels. We're going to start clearing out the large gut parasites. And as we are working through this, then we're going to start going systemically, pulling out parasites that are systemic. Because when you're doing that, you're clearing out and cleaning up the internal environment.
Absolutely.
And that's why when we're doing the comprehensive protocol, it's 6 months in before we even start any detox. And we're not introducing the IS formulas into maybe 7, 8, or 9 months in for someone with chronic Lyme or chronic anything. And we see it start to actually clear up before we even get that far as we clean the environment up.
Yes, we'll get more into the IS products. We're going to go back to our slideshow here. And so that was, before that was, we were talking about Bartonella and how that pleomorphs. Now we've got Babesia. It is shown to pleomorph as well. It's got pyroform rings and multiple infected RBCs, red blood cells. So just another article highlighting that. And then we have the concept of quorum sensing. So this is really how they communicate, right? More or less.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very clever. Bacteria are able to communicate with each other and know how many there are of themselves. So they are highly intelligent. As bacteria are reproducing, they are producing more autoinducers until they reach quorum or critical mass. So when they hit this critical mass, they are then large enough to mount a pathogenic response against the host, and then they'll be strong enough to overwhelm the host's defense mechanisms and initiate an infectious disease. So this is really fascinating to me. Like, they are not just acting on their own. They're like an army, and they're just like, they know what's up.
But again, with this and what we're explaining here is what's actually triggering this quorum sensing. This is what's important, because some branches of science will look at quorum sensing and say, oh, the bacteria is super smart, they all communicate, again, we have to kill the bacteria. Right. But really, we go one step further and go, well, why are all these bacteria gathering in the first place? Because we know they're there to eat the toxins, right? Yep. They live off of them.
Fed.
So again, we go one step deeper into the environment, right? So what's triggering these autoinducers to reproduce? You know, what kind of toxins has this person been exposed to or been injected with, or have been in, you know, in an external environment where they're breathing it in the air, or what kind of emotional state have they been?
You name it. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, situation that they've been in.
So this little cute, happy looking creepy bacteria there they are on the left. They're growing and establishing. They're getting established. Then they're recognizing their density and their amount, and then they're like, okay, let's attack, time to go. So that's a specific gene expression. So that's just kind of showing something visual of how they might mount an attack. And again, factors that stimulate this kind of communication: the numbers of bacteria, fungus, and parasites, the pH changes in the body, temperature changes, deficiency of nutrients or an excess of nutrients, oxidative stress. When people ask what that is, what is that? Oxidative stress.
Well, it depends on what kind of reaction that's taking place. Basically, it's a chemical reaction that takes place. It's a breakdown of something.
Yep. Antibiotics, which wipe out the internal state of the gut, and then toxins. So those all stimulate the quorum sensing, and fungi themselves use it. So this is not just something that's arbitrary. They've got research of the Candida albicans using it intelligently. So
yeah, and fungi, that's a very intelligent species. Yeah. There's so much information coming out on all of that.
Yep. And then there's Lyme quorum sensing. So that's the spirochete. And
so these use the quorum sensing just like anything else, a mechanism to control the amount of the bacteria proteins that they are creating and reproducing, and this, you know, how they transmit from different from ticks that are feeding on
the host.
Yeah.
Through the blood. And exactly. So there's that, and then there's parasites. Parasites use it. So this is just talking about the trypanosome signaling quorum sensing, and that's in Africa.
Yeah, and the stuff out there on the parasite and the way that they communicate is very fascinating. I've gotten into
a book about that?
I've gotten into reading a few books on just like how they take over their host and they communicate and take over that take over that species, basically, to get it to its next, onto the journey so it can get to its next host.
Yeah.
And it just can control the life of that species, basically.
That host,
Yeah.
where it's living. And then we've got bacterial quorum sensing influencing nematodes. Nematodes are the roundworms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is just talking about.
So do you think my parasites are talking to your parasites right now?
They might. Hopefully we don't have that many.
Hopefully we don't,
but like, yeah, they're probably communicating, sure.
Yeah.
So they're talking about the autoinducers, right? In a process known as quorum sensing, bacteria use chemicals called autoinducers for cell-to-cell communication. This is just common knowledge. Has anybody heard of this? Like, does anybody talk about this or know about this? And then there's quorum quenching. So it's kind of the opposite of quorum sensing, right? The quenching is like how to tamp it down, how to stop it, right?
The quorum sensing, it's the bacteria, helps the bacteria virulence genes. It's the quorum quenching inhibits it. Right. So quorum quenching is the mechanism that shuts down the virulence gene expression in bacteria.
Yes.
Yeah, so the quorum quenching works by inactivating signaling enzymes or introduces molecules that mimic signaling molecules and block their receptors. Furthermore, quenching enzymes, degrading signaling molecules, or modify the quorum sensing signals.
So that researchers are now focusing on quorum quenching mechanisms to find new alternatives to antibiotics. Seems like a good path, right? Other than wiping out.
Yeah, but it's like, is this what we need to be focusing on?
Of course not.
No, we need to go back to the environment.
I just fooled you there, didn't I? So then we have the roadmap to health. Thank you, God, because this is targeting these things appropriately.
Yeah, and as I was talking about earlier, we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. And phase 5 is really where we introduce the IS products that we use for helping the body with Lyme.
Yes.
In chronic Lyme, we want to start at phase 1 and go all the way through this whole program with people, though, because again, what got them into that state in the first place is their body just being in a state of toxic parasitic overload
without them knowing it.
Right. Exactly. But if you have an acute case, you can go right
you get
in
a sting,
and
then you get the tick protocol, which we showed last week, and I'll pull it up here in a minute. But this is the long haul approach to healing
your internal environment.
Yes.
And hopefully as you're healing your internal environment and you're eliminating the toxins that are going in, you're starting to become more clear and more in tune with your external environment, and you start to modify your life and externally as well.
Vibrant, and you have energy, and you're healthy, and you look great, and you're happy, and all of it, because that's what we want. So that's your roadmap. So the order of it matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally matters, because parasites have to be the first thing to come out because they harbor all the toxins and the pathogens.
They're the bad guys. The Lyme lives inside of the nematodes. Bacteria live in the Ascaris roundworms. Mold is in the parasites. Like, they're all just filled with this garbage.
Viruses, which are toxins, are stored in the parasites. Parasites produce exosomes, which are viruses that are just being expressed.
Yep.
And parasites, they're sponges for heavy metals, and other toxins. So, where do heavy metals come from? Air,
water,
vaccines, so we have them injected into us since
water,
baby water.
Yes,
yep,
big time.
So when the critters die off, they release these toxins. So when we're going through the protocol, drainage.
Yeah, you can feel bad. Right?
Yeah, and you need those drainage pathways open.
You need the binders
to bind to it. Yep, and energy, the BCATP,
big time, because your body's working hard to get the stuff
throughout the whole protocol, because that energy is needed to work in the system and pull these things out.
Can I get an amen? So here's the timeline. Theoretically, we've got month 1, phase 1, month 2 and 3. Phase 2 is lasting 2 months. Phase 3, 2 months. Same with 4. And then at the end with 4B and phase 5. So we're going to skim past this. And you want to talk about this a little bit?
So taking the IS formulas in phase 5. So you can go on to the next page, because I'm going to just talk about all this. So when you're going through and you start doing these you start taking the protocol. Sometimes we introduce it in early, and sometimes we put it in at the end. But depending on what's going on with the person, if you have expression of symptoms as you're going through this of Lyme, sometimes we might start you on some products and just go, okay, well, we're gonna like slowly introduce some IS-Bor or IS-Bab, 1 to 5 drops maybe, or 1 to 10 drops. But then when we get towards the end, we're really gonna up it and give you it full blast. Some people might not give it till the end, and that all depends on what's going on throughout the whole protocol. But if somebody goes up to if they get a tick bite or something, right, and you want to know, so should I get tested for this? The standard test that they do is very inaccurate. It's garbage.
Right. So what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Is that's this one?
Yeah, the ELISA
test,
the Western blot. That's typically what you get when you go anywhere and get a test done.
So those are not recommended because?
Well, 50 to 70% of them are misdiagnosed because they're not.
Why is that though?
Because the test inaccurate. The test is inaccurate.
Seems pointless.
It's the way that they test. It's inaccurate. They do this whole band system. So
what is recommended?
Well, we use Vibrant Labs, and this is the Tick 2.0, and it just tests for Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella, and all the other common pathogens. It uses IgG and IgM antibodies and PCR, which people have a taste in their mouth about what they think PCR is, but
yes.
It is good for testing fragments. And you can see up on the video we have on the screen here that there's a lot of co-infections that are associated with the tick sting.
Yeah,
and
there's a load here. This is really specific too.
You can read through a few if you want.
I mean, my God, there's like how many versions of Borrelia? This whole this first column is all Borrelia, the whole thing. And there's Babesia, a bunch of Bartonella. There's Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, Coxsackie, West Nile virus, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr, Toxoplasma gondii, Streptococcal A, parvovirus, Toxoplasma gondii, etc. I've had the tick-borne 1 last year with Vibrant, and it was extremely specific. All I had to do was prick my finger and put like 4 drops of blood on these little tiny circles, sent it off, and I got my results like in no time. And it was extremely confirming to know which strains that I had in my body.
So all these different cytomegaloviruses, Epstein-Barr viruses, different toxoplasma viruses, they all can be, they're all opportunistic infections that are associated with Lyme. So remember, polymorphism, right? So as your body is, pleomorphism is, as your body is in this state of a toxic environment, these things are able to be dormant or express and change forms or not change forms. So when you do this Vibrant Lab test, you get a better idea of what is going on in the body. Do you need it? No, you don't necessarily need it, but it's good for the patient who has been like, I have had all these symptoms, nobody knows what's wrong with me. I have all these symptoms, nobody's saying, nobody can figure out what's wrong with me.
Right.
So then when they do take a test like this, it greatly helps the patient to see like, okay, I'm not crazy.
Exactly. And some common questions I think are really great to ask are, do you have chronic brain fog? Do you have cognitive issues? Have you been diagnosed with a neurological disorder, ALS, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's? Do you have joint pain, arthritis? And that can move, that can be transient. Are you diagnosed with RA, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue? Do you have face tingling or asymmetrical even smile? Do you have ED or a lack of libido? So those are top Lyme questions, and we have Bartonella specifically. You do those?
Oh yeah, so these are good. These are symptoms that pop up that people definitely experience for Bartonella, like when someone says, oh yeah, I have foot pain or heel pain, I get up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I can't put my feet on the floor, they hurt, or
Yeah.
they get up in the morning and they're like, their spine is stiff, their neck is stiff. Mood changes, mental disorders, like I have anxiety out of nowhere, or I'm ruminating, I have worry, panic attacks. Like we see big, like all of a sudden I had a panic attack, I have no idea why, or OCD, all related to Bartonella, swollen lymph nodes, fevers that like this little fever that pops up, and stops, comes on, stops, skin issues, the stretch mark, like a rash. That is pretty interesting to see. And then
when you're not overweight.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, when you're not overweight. And then the little small red bumps, macular papular rash, which I had for a very long time. And
really, where was that?
And
right, I forgot about that.
and over the years I've learned the connection of where it came from. And headaches. So being a chiropractor, of course, people coming in and going, oh, my neck hurts, or this, or I feel stiff, or a lot of these symptoms, they might just associate it with like
whatever. I ate something, I'm stressed.
Yes.
What, fill in the blank, right? And then you have Babesia specific questions, which has a lot to do with the air hunger.
That's
so
like
you can't fill up your lungs, like you're breathless. You can't fully take it in, right?
You just can't get a deep breath in.
Chronic upper neck and upper back pain, waking up all in the night sweating. I've had intense, both of those, experiencing episodes of heart arrhythmia, tachycardia, heart racing, palpitations, lightheadedness when you're standing up, and anemia. So that's all affecting the blood.
Yeah, and and when you have a lot of that, when people experience a lot of arrhythmias, and they're like, they might be going to the cardiologist, they might be like, okay, we get this, but like your heart's fine. And it's really big in Babesia.
What's the cause? Right?
Really,
they're not going to look for this.
A lot of heart palpitations, and because
right,
there's even parasites that can be lodged up around the heart that can cause a lot of heart palpitations.
So there it is. So here are the remedies, right? So the IS products themselves. This is Borrelia. IS Bor, developed to help remove Lyme bacteria from muscle tissue, organ tissue, brain tissue, and joints. And you can see all the lovely ingredients here. And then we have BART, IS Bartonella.
Developed primarily to remove all 15 forms of Bartonella, commonly found in the human body from all tissues of the body.
All tissues.
IS Boost is often associated and used with BART when Bartonella is present.
Okay, less ingredients, but extremely, extremely effective. Then we have IS Bab for Babesia, exclusively developed to remove multiple forms of Babesia from organs and joint tissue and the toxins associated with these parasites. Multiple rounds may be necessary due to parasitic nature, leaving growth forms or eggs behind. IS Boost is often used as well with Babesia. And then we have IS Boost.
Yes, an IS Boost is effective against different forms of Babesia and Bartonella, mycoplasma, which comes up a lot, mycobacteria, multiple protozoans, blood-borne pathogens, which there are many. It also provides great liver support, and IS Boost is often used, like we just said, in combination with BART and BAB, and it gives additional boosts to the immune and detoxification pathways. So it's also a great add-in, and a lot of these are good to take numerous times because of the fact that there's so many tiny eggs that are involved in stuff like this.
Definitely. And you'll notice that all of these have walnut in them, and we could just do a whole class on walnut itself, never mind all the other ingredients. But there's a lot of frequently asked questions with these formulas. Is it best to take the IS formulas with or without foods?
For the maximum potency, we recommend taking it on an empty stomach, which is like 20 to 30 minutes before a meal or 2 hours after. But you can absolutely take it with your meal.
Okay, so it's not gonna like render it ineffective. It's just more like better.
Just to absorb it real quickly into the system.
And then can I take BART, BAB, Bor, or Boost in the same glass of water?
Yes, absolutely. They can all be taken together.
That's handy. Can the IS formulas be taken with medication?
Yes, they can. And like all of our CellCore supplements, we always suggest 2 hours away from any medication because they are all herbal in nature
Yes.
and they can have interactions with medication.
Synergistic effects.
Medication can interact with anything.
Yes, of course. If patients are experiencing die-off symptoms with just one of the IS formulas, do you still add in a second one?
Well, yes, that depends. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't, depending on the person and what they're going through. Sometimes we slow that down of what they're taking.
Yeah.
And if they feel like, okay, they got their feet on the ground and they feel, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better, should we pump it back up and then add the second one in?
Yep, it just depends. When it is a good idea to do more than one bottle of an IS formula at a time? When is it?
Well, we always do. We usually always do 2 at a time. So it's always a good idea to do
Yeah.
2 at a time. But if someone has to go slower,
Yep.
it's okay to just spread this out and go for a longer period of time.
Yeah. Okay. And that's just saying about the phase 4B products and Lymphactive. So we're not going to do that. We're doing the summary. Order matters when it comes to Lyme co-infections. They can all hide in parasites, and toxins are a major stressor that triggers pleomorphism and quorum sensing of Lyme and the co-infections.
The IS formulas are used to help address Lyme and co-infections in phase 5 of the comprehensive protocol. The IS formulas can be used anywhere in the protocol as needed, depending on the symptoms that you are experiencing.
Yes. So that's a lot, and it's brilliant. What I want to pull up is when you have an acute situation where you find a tick, you might have gotten a sting. There's been a lot of that going on in your practice, hasn't there?
Well, yeah, at certain times of year, maybe in the spring or in the fall, it's like different, you'll see different things and it kind of, it makes sense the way that they talk to each other, right? We just learned that they talk to each other.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you'll see all these people having symptoms of boar, or
Right.
all these people having symptoms of BAB that are popping up at the same time, different times a year.
Yep.
Which it's, the more you practice, you see
It's
the
pattern.
patterns of these things.
And then we have a question from Karen. What if you're allergic to walnut?
So generally, Karen, when we have the walnut, we have had people who have had allergies that say, I'm allergic to walnut. And what we generally have them do, because we haven't really seen anyone have allergic responses to this, when we bring it in, especially at the end, after their body's cleared out a lot of all the other toxins, and their IgE reactions or their IgG reactions, their allergic reactions to things become less because now their immune system can handle stuff. But generally what we have them do is we might, if they agree to do it, we might have them take a glass of water and put 1 drop in it and then split that into 2 glasses. So you're really microdosing it and break it down and put a little on their skin and that, like maybe on their wrist. And then we'll bring it up and say, okay, well, maybe we'll increase it a little bit and maybe we'll just put it on your lip, see if there's any kind of reaction. And we'll gradually increase it and get it into the system to actually see if they have an immune system reaction to it or not. But generally what we find with most people with a lot of different types of things they have allergies to is as they go through the comprehensive protocol and their immune system changes and becomes more in balance, now it can actually handle these environmental stressors that were creating an allergic response in the first place.
I mean, that makes sense. You're clearing out the environment, right? So that's a good question. And here's the tick bite protocol, just to go over that again. And it's good just to have these, obviously the 4 IS products, but it's great to have the BCATP, biotoxin binder, and the KL support on hand as well, because those are going to support you as you move through using the protocol, which theoretically would last for 2 weeks. And that's spells it out. So you could screenshot it or, take a picture of it, whatever, or, but
yeah, IS Bor, IS Bab, IS Bart, and IS Boost are the 4 IS products. And then we bring in Para 3 and Para 4 again,
No,
because
why would you do
these,
that?
because if
Right?
you're getting bit by flies, mosquitoes,
Not just-
stung by a
not
tick,
just ticks,
or
right? Fleas even,
fleas,
right?
any of the things that these transmit, these different types of parasites, basically, you want to use the para 3 and the para 4 to address these. And the para 4 works really great with the IS4 on top of the BCATP.
Yes.
So yeah, you want to also bring in, like Sharon just said, the BCATP for mitochondria, biotoxin binder to help the microbiome and to help to bind to a lot of the toxins and help to bring them out of the body, and the kidney, the KL support to support your kidney and liver function.
That's right. So really amazing solutions and tools to have. So the 4IS, the para 3, para 4, and then those 3 other products. And that's a lot, but it pretty much wraps up
Yeah, so
what to do if you get exposed to a tick sting, or if you suspect you have Lyme. What if you don't suspect anything at all? What if you just want to do the comprehensive protocol?
yes, and remember that it's the triggers in the environment that create a internal response. So the cleaner your environment, the more healthier your immune system is, the more able you can live and probably have this dormant in you. This goes on to anything.
Exactly.
And you can have it dormant in your body because we're filled with
covered
bacteria,
fungus, you name it,
all kinds of things.
We're just crawling with it.
But if we're tossing back alcohol and we're eating crappy foods, breathing horrible air, what's going to happen to our body?
Eventually the toxic load is like,
yes, our environment's going to be
stressors. We covered all that. So
exactly.
Hopefully this is helpful to you and to your loved ones, and you learn from it. Obviously our disclaimer is now at the end. We're not intending to treat, diagnose, or cure anyone. This is just for educational and informational purposes, as you all know, but good stuff. So if anyone has any questions, go for it. If not, our next call will be in 2 weeks' time, right? So that will be the 26th of July.
Yes.
Wow, summer's flying by. So we look forward to seeing you all then, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Mwah.
Thank you.